morning, friends. In the last session, we had a look at the value type and reference type of method parameters. There are four types of parameters that a method can have, as already discussed. So the other two that remains to be seen, which we'll look at today, are the output parameter type and the parameter arrays. So grab your cup of coffee and get ready. I'm going to share my screen and start off. All right, so I'm going to create a method here called multiples. And this is going to take in as a parameter an integer value on which we are going to do a square and a cube. So the square is going to be returned as a integer return type. So instead of void, I'm going to make it as return type of int. And then the cube is going to be returned as an output parameter type. So out int cube, I'll call it cube, I'm going to call it as, right? Okay, now how do we do this? As far as the return type int, which is going to be a square, is pretty simple. The value that is supplied x, I'm going to return with a multiple of square of that. So it's going to be return x into x. So that takes care of my square. Now the other thing is, when you have an output parameter type within a method, you need to supply value for the output parameter type before you leave the method. So that is the error you're going to see. You're seeing there. If you see here, it says the out parameter cube must be assigned before before control leaves the current method. So we need to assign it a value. So it's going to be cube equals x into x into x. That's the cube. So the multiples method is ready, and we are having two values being returned by the same single method. One is through a return type integer, where we are returning the square of that number. And by assigning a value to this output parameter, the cube of the number is returned. Okay, so now let us call the method here. So into an integer variable square, I'm going to capture the returned value of multiples. So multiples expects an integer value to be supplied and also an output parameter to be supplied. So for that, I need to initialize an output parameter. Let's say int cube equals 0. And then that is going to be passed here as an output type, out cube. So when I do this variable cube will get a value once the method is run. And of course, the square is returned, which is captured into the variable square. So now let us just try to print it out. Okay, so the square is placeholder 0 and the cube is placeholder 1. Let us see, it's going to be square and cube. So we are done. Let us run this and see what happens. Okay, so the square is 100 and the cube is 1000 of 10. Let's see one more example. I'm going to pass a 2 as the value. So 4 and 8 should be the square and the cube. Square is 4 and the cube is 8. Perfect. So that's the output parameter type, which we just saw. Now let us remove this. The last parameter type of a method, which is the parameter array. So I need to have a params keyword followed by int array x or a string or whatever. So this is how a parameter array is declared. And then let us say we print it out. So we can, well, of course, I don't have any return type here. So for each integer, say mark in x, right? Assume that this is marks that are captured as an array. So in marks, right? I'm going to just print out console.writeLine. Mark. So this is what happens here in this method. And when we call the method now, well, it's not going to be multiples. Let's say parameter example. And There's no return type. So of course I need to pass parameter for this. So it's zero parameter. Actually, I need to pass a parameter array. So let us create a parameter array here. Int marks, int array marks equals, let's supply some values. All right. So that's a parameter array. I'm going to put this marks as the argument here. Okay, we are done. So let me run it and see by first removing this. We don't need it because the console.write line happens here. Okay, so it's printing out the values. So that's the parameter array. We need to know a couple of things about parameter arrays. Number one, the parameter array should be the last item in the list of parameters of a method. I can have it like this: int x, string y, and then the params, parameter. String y, I mean. Okay, but I cannot do this int x following the parameter array, because parameter array should be the last parameter of the parameters of the method, which also means therefore as a corollary that you cannot have two parameter arrays. So I cannot do this. This is not allowed. The first one will show an error because the only last one is valid or legitimate. This one cannot be put in. The error shown, if you see here, is the parameter must be the last parameter in a formal parameter list. Okay, just these two things we need to keep in mind. You can have multiple parameters, but it should be the last one, right? The params parameter. You cannot have more than one parameter. Okay, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, that completes the 4 types of parameters a method can have. So let us just quickly list them out. 4 types are value type, reference type, output type, the parameter array. Okay, so that completes the parameter types of a method. And this is a quick session, but very important, especially the difference between a value type and a reference type, and how a parameter array can be, it should be the last element of a parameter array. And of course, output parameter type too. Okay, so that's the end of this session. See you again for the next session. Bye-bye.